Hello and welcome to the Mobile Accessible Games interview series. I'm your host, Aaron Spelker. Mobile Accessible Games is a group that's focused on all things about mobile accessible gaming. And through our interview series, we interview game developers, accessibility influencers, as well as accessibility content creators. And this week, we have two people from 3 Minute Games, the creators of the Lifeline series. We have Mars Jokela and David Justus. Welcome, guys.
Howdy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Well, thank you. I always like to just kind of kick off the interview with, give you guys each a minute or two just to give a little background, who you are and, what you're about. And we'll start with Mars.
All right. Hi, I'm Mars Jokela. I've been a game developer for just about 20 years now. I've worked on all sorts of games all across the spectrum, from PC games to console games, Wii games, motion control games, free-to-play games, mobile games, virtual reality, augmented reality games, kind of everything under the sun. And so Lifeline is one of those, and I'm really happy and pleased to be able to continue making these games with Dave and the rest of the team.
Excellent.
As far as myself, I come from comic books and a couple of short stories, and really lucked into the Lifeline writing gig when a friend of mine had to pass on it. And so that was back in 2015, Mars.
That's right. Yeah, that feels right.
Which that's incredible to think about, that I've been in the gaming industry for 8 years now.
Was that on the very first Lifeline, or did you come in somewhere?
No, that was the very first Lifeline, which I was very humbled to be asked to write, and continue to be humbled even to this day to be able to work with 3 Minute Games on that.
Well, we're delighted to have found you in the first place, Dave. It's obviously worked out.
We all love each other so much.
And David, before we started, you were telling us the graphic novel that you've written for, which I think would be interesting to the community.
Yeah, one of the earlier things I did with my co-writer Lila Sturgis is to adapt the Telltale game Fables: The Wolf Among Us. So we got to do a comic book adaptation that basically cemented the choices that we made in the game as the canon choices for the Fables universe, which was kind of cool.
And how many episodes was there, or comic books came out in that?
I want to say we ran to 16 issues or 18 issues, and then it was collected into 2 trade paperbacks.
Oh, nice. Excellent.
Yes.
So we're here to talk about the Lifeline series. And for those who may not know, again, maybe I'll just turn it over to you, Mars, because you probably can say it even better than I can. Just tell people a little bit, what is the Lifeline series of games about?
Sure. Lifeline is, I like to call them texting adventures. You're essentially playing a choose your own adventure on your mobile phone or your Apple Watch or your Android wearable device. And so you're in the first game, you're communicating with an astronaut who's stranded on an alien planet. And it quickly becomes apparent that they are in a lot of trouble, and you're the only person who can help them make wise choices in order to survive the crisis. And we've continued the series. We've released 8 Lifeline games so far, and we're continuing to make new ones. And there's a little bit of history behind how the game came to be in the first place that I can get into later if you want to expand on that. But maybe Dave, do you have anything to add in the high level?
I think you hit all of the elevator pitch points, which is, texting adventure, lonely astronaut, you're the only person who can help. And then as we've done subsequent Lifeline games, there have been other different characters that you're the only person who can lend them help. So the player winds up being the lifeline of the title, which makes them very important in the gaming process.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to that elevator pitch is it's like a real-time text adventure. So you exchange a conversation with Taylor, who you follow through the kind of main storyline, and as you said, you have some spin-offs that follow some other characters. But as you're talking to Taylor, you might say, Taylor, why don't you go outside and explore the canyon, and then that Taylor will be gone for a period of time and you'll get a notification on your phone or your watch, 6 hours later that says, Taylor's back from exploring, connect with her. And that's another interesting thing as I thinking of how to say Taylor. I had always thought of Taylor as a man, and we were just talking about this as before we started. That really you purposely wrote Taylor to be either, so that the person who is playing the game can kind of have it whatever way they want, whether it be a male or a female astronaut that you're helping. I thought that was kind of a really interesting approach and choice to really think of right from the beginning.
That's right. That's something that's mattered a lot to us from the beginning, is representation, and making sure that as much as possible the player can project themselves onto the lonely astronaut that you're helping to rescue, and so that ambiguity is a part of that. We never describe Taylor's race as well, and so it really allows anyone to enjoy the games in ways that they feel most natural.
And I like that component too of, as opposed to just a straight text adventure, you have kind of that real time component of it of, it takes Taylor time to do things, whatever you suggest, he or she go do. And you got to kind of wait for that to happen before you know the result. So that kind of adds some suspense and realism to the situation as well.
All right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, when you are, it's 2015, let's go back 8 years, and Dave has just joined. Do you have already an idea of Lifeline that you're asking Dave to write, or do you guys sit down and, from scratch together come up with, well, this is what we want to write about and do? And then, kind of in that process, where did that idea come from?
Yeah, let me take that one because it's complicated actually, as game development often is. The original concept for Lifeline came from the announcement at WWDC, Apple's developer conference, in I think that was 2014 at the time. The next version of iOS that was releasing was going to add this capability for interactive notifications on your lock screen.
Mm-hmm.
And so Colin, who unfortunately was unable to join us today, he's our engineer and co-founder of 3 Minute Games, and really our leader. It's unfortunate he can't be with us today. But he had the idea that you could make a text-based adventure that you could play completely without even running the game. So you could just make your choices from the lock screen, and that real-time component would let the notifications come in when there was new story to deliver. And so that really that defined the real-time concept and led to the story structure that we see, where we have binary choices that push the story forward, and sometimes you make the wrong choice and the story ends, and sometimes you make the right one and it moves right along. So we had that initial concept, and Colin had worked with a friend or acquaintance of his who was interested in writing it, but wound up not having the availability. But the original concept for the story of it being a stranded astronaut, and the story would play out over the course of several days, was from those early days. And Colin could maybe speak a little bit more of that if he were here. But unfortunately, we only made it so far in that original prototype phase, and it became clear actually not long after, later that year in 2014, I believe, that Apple announced the upcoming release of the Apple Watch, and we were like, oh wow, we're making games that would, like, if we have a game concept that is perfect for the Apple Watch, it is Lifeline. And so we wanted to hit the launch of the Apple Watch, which was several months away at that point, but it gave us a finite deadline to work towards. And so
was that like a big boost for you to be one of the first games coming out right as the Apple Watch is coming out? So that
absolutely, yeah, it was huge. We were really there was one other game that came out that had a similar sort of format, but it didn't really nail the story as strongly, I believe. At the time, it focused a little bit more on like the gaming aspect of making choices and moving your character forward.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was really the strong story that Dave wound up writing for us that really resonated with folks and gained the game its popularity and led to all the sequels. So yeah, it was that deadline that we were staring down, and we needed a writer. And so I reached out to contacts of mine in the science fiction fantasy community, and eventually that led to a friend of a friend of a friend, as Dave said earlier, and he came on board and took that initial like kernel of the story and was able to run with it. Really, at the time, I didn't have any direction for him. I said, like, what story do you want to write?
Right. That's nice. That's some nice freedom to have, David.
Yeah, it was very very much, I was handed the very basic idea and said, I asked, do you want this to be hard science fiction? Do you want this to be space opera? Do you and Mars was very much like, it can be anything you want it to be as long as you get it to me by this day. So it was, it was working within a structure while also having an awful lot of freedom, which was, I think in a way it was probably the best of all situations, because it made me just buckle down and come up with something that apparently worked.
Was this kind of your first time doing something with a branching storyline?
Absolutely. So yeah, I was learning on the fly, and trying to figure out how to sort of corral the choices before they got completely out of control.
Sure. And how did you keep track of, this, if you choose A, you're going to end up over here, and then, again, to kind of keep track, and so you don't end up in a dead end spot, and everything kind of ties together. How did you structurally manage that?
The program that I do all of my work in is called Twine, which is a freeware program. Yep. So it has a user interface, a visual user interface that works very well for me in terms of telling you, this is how many branches you have off of this choice.
Right.
And basically let me know, hey, I haven't closed this thread. I haven't given a satisfactory ending to this line of actions. So thankfully it was, it's coding for dummies. It does a lot of work for you that I did not have the knowledge or ability to do on my own.
Yeah, Twine is I had done some stuff on Twine before I lost my sight, and it's kind of as basic or as complex as you want it to be, exactly. Which is what is really kind of nifty about it. I had tried the complex route, and it gets get a lot of branching things. So, again, kind of keeping it corralled, keeping not dead end paths is really tough to do. But in this, you go through, you write a little narrative, you have, click here, it goes to choice A, click here, go to choice B. Were you able to basically turn over Twine to Mars and just say, copy and paste what's in this, this particular window, and that's, how you kind of move through?
I know that it went from me to them, and it went then into a proprietary engine that I knew I would not understand any of. So I was lucky enough to go, if I wanted to do this, can you guys make that happen? And they would say yes. And so as far as I knew, it went from me and became magic. Okay. But I'm sure Mars can tell you more about that.
Yeah, did you have to rework a lot of David's stuff, or was it pretty good as he turned it over to you?
Yeah, well, it pretty much. So what Twine does is it can export a file called a TWE file that our engine can ingest and parse and turn into the choices that you make in the app that you're playing on your phone. What was important was that as in the course of doing QA and play testing the game on the phone, and really kind of fully experiencing it, you run into bugs, as all games do. Anytime that we found a bug and needed to fix it, it was important that we would push those changes back up into the story file in Twine, so that the next time Dave did an export, we didn't wind up with the same bug again. Right. So it's a little bit of a manual process, and it could be improved, but it's been working for us for years, and so we haven't changed it too much.
Do you have any sense? I mean, I don't know if Mars would know this, or David, if you would know this, but across your 8 games of Lifeline, how many words are comprising this story?
Oh boy, you have a ballpark on that, Mars?
Well, the first game was about 45,000 words.
Yeah, roughly that. I think of it as around 50, and then Bloodline is close to 90. which is
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah, so
And then,
they fluctuate kind of between those bounds, more or less.
yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, again, that's 90,000 is a novel length. I mean, it's probably a 300-page book at that point. If you,
right, and that it wound up proving that that's an awful lot to try and process. So we have since then we've kind of scaled back to slightly smaller novels.
Yeah, it's one of the tensions when you're making games like this with branching storylines, and the reason why you don't see a lot of like AAA scale games with the choices that you make having profound effects later in the story is that most players won't see most of the content that you make unless you structure it smartly so that you can kind of either bring people back towards the main story thread or have it end and make it obvious that they need to step back and change the choices that they made. So we say that it's 90,000 words in Bloodline. I can't really estimate how many of those you would see in a typical playthrough, but we try to make sure that you get a complete experience and you see most of the content when you do play through.
I just played a game which I thought this was great. They had kind of some statistics, so you could go in, you played through the first time and it said you saw 40% of the content, and then you play through the second time and now you've seen 65% of the content, so you could kind of see how much have I actually seen in this game and just kind of keep going back until you got that percentage closer and closer to 100%, which kind of made me go back and play multiple times because I suddenly realized, well, wow, I didn't see 60% of this game. I better go back and make some different choices. So I thought that was kind of.
I like that, I do, but as a designer, there's a tension in that presentation that makes the game feel gamier to the end player. And one of the things that we've recurringly noticed with players talking about Lifeline is that they really felt like it was a conversation with a person that really needed them. And so we've actually made a number of choices that kind of minimize the gaminess of it in this presentation, so that it really maintains that level of immersion as much as possible.
Now you mentioned that you have kind of when it goes from David over to you, Mars, that it's some proprietary software. Could you talk more about what that is? Like what software you're using to do?
Yeah. On both iOS and Android, we've written a custom game engine. At different points, we've used different technologies. Currently, the engine is written in Objective-C on iOS, using Xcode, your typical kind of app development workflow. And then on Android, it's written in I think mostly Java and built to an APK. So at different times, like I said, we've used different technologies. We had an implementation in Unity at one point because it could target different platforms pretty easily. But this is where we've settled, and we're pretty content because what this gets us is access to native features on the platforms, like being able to target the Apple Watch, for instance, and use the notifications without the hassle of going through an intermediary engine.
Any chance is it Lifeline Wipeout that used Unity?
It may have been, actually. That was the one app in the series that was developed by another partner developer that was a frequent collaborator with Big Fish. So at that time, they were working with another studio, and they said, here's an opportunity to expand the Lifeline series. Why don't you make us a game? And so we have their code at this point, but it was the one like sort of offshoot that wasn't using all of our technology.
That is again one of the great things about Lifeline and just kind of the text adventure genre in general is usually it is accessible for those who are blind and visually impaired. That is the one game in the series that isn't accessible. So that's why, and usually things on Unity struggle with accessibility. So that's why I was wondering if that was the particular one. Speaking, as I kind of just mentioned, accessibility. So, again, this is when you're on the Apple phone and you're using the voiceover feature, which is for those who are blind and visually impaired to navigate their phone. Lifeline works great. Typical swiping gestures, double tapping to select your choices. Did that kind of come out easily with the proprietary software you had, or did you have to do a lot of work to ensure that the game was accessible?
It did come out pretty easily, more or less. That's obviously one of the benefits of having a native game engine running on, running from Xcode and running on the device. So it was easy to implement those accessibility features. Lifeline obviously lends itself incredibly well to the voiceover feature, it being like it's just a texting adventure,
Right.
essentially. So it was more or less a happy accident of the design, and but we've seen the positive benefits of that from, like, we've heard from so many visually impaired players that really have enjoyed the game over the years, and have reached out and just specifically made a point of, like, praising and commending the implementation. So it's been really great to hear.
And that's one of the things, like, did you create the game, and at the time that you created the game, maybe because you kind of have some history in gaming, well before 2015, I mean, did you know about accessibility when the game came out, or did you put it out and then someone reached out and said, hey, this is great, it's accessible or mostly accessible, and that's when you kind of learned about accessibility?
Yeah, I mean, for me as a game developer, having been in the industry for so long, it's something that we think about all the time. We try to make our games as much as we can accessible. Many games don't lend themselves to it, like, obviously you could tell me more about that than I would be able to speak to. But as much as possible, we do our best to accommodate vision impairments. Most games, we try to have at least filters for colorblind players, or we are conscious of the design of elements so that they don't rely completely on color. And it's something that has been discussed in professional gaming circles for many years, but many developers don't wind up allocating the budget or the time or the consideration to that really is that the concern requires or deserves, which is unfortunate. It's something that we're like, people talk about as much as they can, but it doesn't often wind up playing out in results that are playable for a broad part of the community. But there are other things that are beneficial, like being able to remap controls when you're playing a console or PC game is really important. But again, it's something that a lot of people, even like, so I'm speaking as like a professional who's gone to game developer conference for many years, and we talk about these things in those circles. There's a lot of people out there who are making games now who never get that exposure and never get to talk about it and really understand how important it is, which is unfortunate. It's kind of a side effect of the democratization of game development, which has happened in the last 10 plus years. Everybody can make a game now, but not everybody knows how to make a great one.
Right. Well, the interesting thing in talking to a lot of game developers through this process, through this mobile accessible games group that I have, the indie developers seem to be the ones who really dig into accessibility. Like, they hear somebody wants to play their game, and they'll go in and try to figure it out and make it, because getting 100 more blind people downloads actually means something to them. Getting 100 or 1,000 or maybe even 5,000 more downloads of a AAA Xbox game means nothing, and is it really worth the time and the money to do that for another 5,000 in sales?
Right.
Maybe not, but another 5,000 for sales for some indie developer is amazing. So it really kind of makes a difference, and it's those indie developers that I have found that are willing to put the time and the effort in, and have been on the forefront of doing some of the accessibility things. I said well before Last of Us Part 2 ever came out.
Right. I was about to mention that one as well, as a great shining example of somebody who made the argument that it's worth investing in doing this work at scale. It's harder to make that argument when you're working for a huge developer like that. When you're indie, like, you're making your own decisions, and you can just decide that that's valuable and important work to do, and do it, and
Yeah.
and that's all there is to it.
I hope with The Last of Us Part 2, and I think they're doing a little bit of it, but to take the structure that they've had and apply that to all the Sony based games,
Mm-hmm.
and have them maybe even license out their accessibility infrastructure to other games.
Yeah.
That might be a thing that we see in the future. So
it'll depend a lot on the specific developers and what technology they're using. I know that Naughty Dog does share their game engine with some of the internal Sony studios, but plenty of them are using Unity or Unreal or their own proprietary tech, and so it's not that transportable across games, unfortunately. But like what they have done is the research and established some standards for what they can shoot for. And so like once you have the designs for what good accessibility design looks for, it's easier to take that as a template and re-implement it in your own game engine.
Yeah, and conceptually think what is possible.
Yeah. And to see the value that it brings, and how much people respond well to it.
Now, 3-minute games, you have David as the writer, Colin, as you said, as the fearless leader, and then yourself as programming. Is that primarily your role?
Game designer and kind of all around shop hand is what I do.
Right.
All the marketing materials I'm creating. I run the Twitter. I respond to the emails. I'm kind of present to pick up whatever slack there may be at any given point.
And is that pretty much the group? It's a kind of a 3-man team.
Yeah. That's our core team. We work with artists that we know from previous projects and companies when we need title art, for instance, or UI art for new games coming out. And we work with an external translation studio that does our localization.
That's actually a good question. I mean, I never really thought about what visuals might be in the game. Are there any visuals in the game as you're playing? Or is it mostly kind of give you the simulation of just a text stream communication back and forth?
It's pretty much like we have our own art for the text interface, so it doesn't just look like a messaging app.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to make it look immersive or appropriate to the setting. So like Beside You in Time, for instance, has very kind of like science fiction interface look to it. But most of the artwork that we do is both the UI design like that and just the title screen art. It's like the cover of a book, essentially.
And with 8 games out at this point in the series, unlike a lot of indie developers I talk to, which they're going to a full-time job and then working on a game at night, I get the sense that this is kind of full-time what you're working on.
It varies. Actually, Colin and I are doing this, in our evenings. We both have full-time jobs, and then Dave is kind of flexible with his timing. I don't know if you want to speak to
that. I've got another couple of things that are going on, but this is my priority. So
most of the work is on Dave in creating these games, honestly.
Sure. Got to think about the story. That's the hard part. Yeah. Speaking of those things, Dave, what are the other things that you have going on besides working on the Lifeline series?
Well, at the moment, what I'm working on is the next game from 3-minute, which, like I say, it's far enough in the future that there's not really anything that we can say about it other than, if people are wondering if we're working on something, yes, we certainly are. And then I have just now, like last week, sold a graphic novel pitch. So again, it's far enough in the future that I won't tell anyone to start looking for it yet. But
can you even say what the genre is? Is it fantasy? Is it sci-fi? Is it?
It'll be young adult humor. Yeah, that's again the ink is not yet dry on the contract.
Yeah, we don't want to give too much away, right? Yeah, sure, absolutely.
But yeah, I'm lucky enough to be able to live as a freelance writer right now, which was my dream since I was about 8 years old. So
that's excellent.
It'll all come crashing down someday, but in the meantime, I feel very blessed to be able to do that.
And then Mars, you have something that's coming out tomorrow, right? You said.
So we have Lifeline Plus is going to be available on Apple Arcade starting tomorrow. It's the same game content from the original Lifeline. So if you have or intend to play Lifeline, the normal premium game, just keep playing that one. The main difference is that it's available for arcade subscribers at no additional cost. And we're really excited to bring the game to new audiences and get more exposure for it.
You kind of mentioned, anybody can kind of create a game these days. If there's somebody who is aspiring to create a game, what advice would you have for them to, make that path a little bit easier for them?
Oh, there's so much. Starting small is the first thing. And shipping something early. Like, make a small game and release it. You will learn so much more from that process than you could possibly predict before going through it. So pick something small. Pick a technology that's easy to work with. If you want to, like, for instance, you said you were playing with Twine. That's a great place to start. You can publish your own game on a website using Twine for nothing, for peanuts. All it takes is your time that you spend coming up with the idea, developing it, editing it, finishing it. Finishing it is the hardest part. We like to say that the last 10% is 90% of the work.
Right.
But finishing something and shipping it and getting feedback from people will be more valuable than anything else.
Is there any, and I know you have a version that's coming out in, a year or a year and a half. Is there any kind of new gameplay components or mechanics that you're going to incorporate into this new game that's coming out?
We'll see. There's definitely some stuff that we have talked about in the past of wanting to try and incorporate into games, and a lot of that is just figuring out the right way to do it and the right game to apply it to. So
yeah, like even with besides you and time, you got to actually name yourself. Give I can put my name as Aaron, and so that Taylor's talking to me and
right.
mentioning my name.
Taylor finally knows who you are.
Exactly. And there's more interaction. I mean, the other games primarily you were engaging solely with Taylor, but now you kind of can engage with some of the other characters as well besides Taylor in that main storyline.
Right. So yeah, we look for little interesting things to do like that in the games. One of them had like the playlist that we actually made a Spotify playlist, and you could listen along with Taylor. So just things like that we think will be interesting to players, or that might foster some sense of community. And we've got an amazing fan community already. So anything we can do to kind of, get them excited in the games, we look to do that.
Yeah.
So where can those fans find you? You said you have the community. Is that on Twitter or or website? Where can they find out more about?
There's a Discord that's very active.
Yeah, indeed.
And really, I think a lot of the reason that we knew that we could come back after some time away was because we knew that there were a lot of people, keeping that torch lit for Lifeline.
It has stunned me how many people have, the story has resonated with them to the degree that they have, built a community around it. It's really, it just floors me every time to think about it. And like Dave said, that gave us the confidence that, and it felt almost like a duty to resurrect the series, for the fans. There have been so many things, in my life that, have been abandoned and forgotten, and I didn't want to do that to people. So we got together and we made it happen. It's been really a fantastic experience coming back to it after so much time.
Excellent. So as we kind of get close to wrapping up here, is kind of any final thoughts that you have for whether it be a game developer or a player, just around engaging with games, or again, seems like you had a pretty easy path of creating accessibility for those who might be blind and visually impaired, and you've had some good dialogue with them. But just any comments you have for any of those parties.
Dave, anything in mind?
Boy, it's I know that you know, a lot of the reason that we do anything is because we receive feedback. You know,
Yeah.
we're a very small group of people trying very hard to please as many other people as we possibly can. So, you know, it's always good to hear feedback about what we're doing right and what we can improve, because we're actually listening. Your communication is not going to get lost somewhere in a corporate inbox.
Yeah, I would echo that and extend it to, you know, any game that you like and feel like you want to engage with. The creators are there and they're available now. You can access the people who made the games and give them your feedback, and they will treasure it. They will value it, and they will probably incorporate it. You know, if it's accessibility concerns, reach out and let them know that something is wrong, because they probably don't know. And hearing about it will, you know, probably lead to improvements for not just, you know, yourself, but for everyone else who would like to experience, you know, improve accessibility in games. It's something that, you know, matters to us, but we want to, you know, continue to promote it. I think that that's one of the things that really is lacking, you know, in lack of accessibility to games, is just knowledge and understanding that it's a concern. So the more that developers hear about it, the more that they'll make positive changes in the future.
Great. Well, you know, Mars and David, I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about the Lifeline series. Again, a great accessible game for those who are blind and visually impaired, because it's primarily text-based, and a great, interesting story about Taylor and all the crazy situations she gets herself into that you have to help her get out of. So that main story of Taylor goes over 4 different games, and then there's some additional 4 games that are about some of the other characters that you meet along the way. So lots of content to be able to, you know, play and enjoy over a period of time. So I thank both of you for creating it and spending some time with me to talk about it.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so much.
talking with us.
Yeah, this has been a great time.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And everybody, be sure to check out the description where we will share all the social media links for 3 Minute Games and the Lifeline series. And, you know, come back next time.